Cloud. Okay, so today, first let me just talk about the homework assignment that might cause some of you some trouble. So in the homework assignment, we do something a little bit unusual in the grader. The grader actually creates a text file, like during the grading process. It's like, you know what, we're gonna make a text file here and then just make sure that you're actually reading that text file to make sure that you're doing what the assignment requires. And there are some kind of what I would say overly aggressive malware programs that kind of look at that file being created by Excel and say, that's evil, and just like terminate the process. So if you're like in the process of doing the homework and like Excel just stops, that's probably your antivirus saying something unusual is going on here. If you're in that situation, just upload it to the assignment on Learning Suite and the TAs will download it and grade it so it'll post a score. Okay, but today then we're talking about really not just the built-in file dialogues. We'll see how to work with those, but I'm also going to get you started on the next project. So kind of the active project that we have right now that's next due is user forms, yeah? And then the next one after that is the database project, I think. That's right, that's the next one. This database project is kind of generally accepted as the most difficult project of the term. It's reflected in the number of points that it has. It's the one that's worth the most points. I used to have it as the very last project because it brings together lots of things from the class to be able to do. But the end of the semester is a hassle, in every class. And so I pulled this one forward, and our last project is a pretty lightweight one. So don't let this database project sneak up on you. And I want you to think of today as Professor Allen is getting us going on that project. The title here doesn't jump up and down and say, oh, this is going to help me with a database project. But what we're doing today, you might even want to look at what we do today and say, okay, that's the code I'm going to start with when I go to do the project, because we're really doing some of the important stuff today. We'll transfer over with almost no variation. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look. There's a file to download for today, crime.zip. And I will, in fact, I've downloaded that. Let's go ahead and get that extracted. You'll definitely want that to be extracted. So right now I've opened this in Windows and I can tell it's a zip file because it says .zip up here. I've got my extract tools. So I'm just going to extract all. Extract those and downloads crime. That's a fine place to extract them. Okay, so these then are just a bunch of files. And these files are actually a report from the FBI from a data set that they call crimes or offenses known to law enforcement. And this particular set is crimes that have known to have occurred on college campuses. And so this is actually the way the data was given out by the FBI. I'm not sure they're still publishing this data because I've looked to kind of update this particular assignment. And I can't find the newest data. So we kind of go up to 2011. Yeah, that would be great. I'd love to see how to get the latest data. Thank you. So in fact, back when I downloaded this, probably in 2012, I was kind of looking for data. I thought this would be really great data. This is data, about crimes committed on college campuses. This is going to feel somewhat relevant to my students. And, but it was like, hey, if you want this full data set, email this person at fbi.gov. And I thought, oh, that seems like a weird thing, but okay. So I emailed them and said, hey, listen, I'd really love to get this data I'm using for an example at a university class. And like 2 weeks later, I got a CD-ROM in the mail. And I thought, that's different. Even for 2012, I don't think we were mostly, kind of mailing data around. But I said, okay. And I looked, sure enough, here it was. It was a data set. It was these files and some other files, but it was these Excel files. This is how we're going to give you the data. And I thought, oh, great. This will be great. This is great data. And I thought I'm going to get to it someday. And I set it aside and didn't think about it. About a month or two later, I'm sitting in my office and I get a call. And I get a little caller ID thing on my office phone, and it says Federal Bureau of Investigation. And I got to tell you, I live a really boring life. But even so, when the FBI calls you, think, oh my gosh, what have I done? And I answered the phone, kind of tentatively, this is Dr. Allen. Oh, Dr. Allen, did we send you a CD, crime data? And I was like, yes. And like still like in my top drawer, I pulled it out and said, I'm holding it in my hand and now. And they said, oh, thank goodness. Could you send that back to us? That was our original copy. I was never so happy to say, yes, I'll send this right back to you. But it was just amazing to me. That's the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Folks, if you're not worried, you should be worried. You just should be worried. Anyway, so I'm just going to kind of preview for you the database project that's coming up. We're not talking about databases today, but this happens to be the same data files that we're going to work with. So I'm going to give you like an Access database that has the years 2006 through 2010, this data all kind of collated and brought into a database table. And now here you've gotten the next set of data from the way the FBI gives it out. And you've got to read these files, kind of go step by step and get the data off and put them into the database. That's going to be the task that you're going to have to do. And so the first part of the task is going to be managing the files. And so that's where we're headed today. So just the mechanism of saying, okay, I've got all these files in a folder. I want to go through and kind of open each one and do something with them all. That's what we're going to, that's ultimately where we're going and why today's work will be really helpful for that project. So that's like your benefit for actually either watching the video or being here in class today, because a lot of students take this class and they're all like, I'm just going to try to get the assignments done and call it good. And they're going to struggle on this project. All right. So I've got those files extracted. Let's just go ahead and make a new Excel file. So I'll open up Excel. I think I'll open up Excel. There we go. And I'm going to make a new file and I'm going to save it, file save as. I want to save it in the same place where that crime folder is, not inside the crime folder, but at the same level as a sister to that crime folder where all those files have been extracted. So for me, that's going to be in downloads. And here's where it says crime. So again, I don't want to go into that. I just want to be right next to it. So I'm just going to call this, well, I'll call it crime data winter 2022. And make sure it's an XLSM. Let's see. Did I already say save it as an XLSM? Browse. Not trying to open. Save as. Downloads. Save as an XLSM. There we go. I'm not sure what I was doing. That's what I need to do. And I'll call this W22. Okay. So our first task today is to understand this built-in file dialog. So we've seen user forms, how we can create our own dialog boxes from scratch, but there are some dialog boxes that are kind of standard, like you want to open a file, you want to save a file. You just kind of, not actually open a file, but just kind of collect the information about which file you want to open. And so that's where we're after today. So I'm going to go ahead and insert a new module. And let's go ahead and make a sub-procedure called FileDialog. Okay, so I'm going to declare a variable, dim FD, short for FileDialog, as an office.FileDialog. So that's, as a particular kind of object. It's an object that's built into Microsoft Office. They use the same kind of open file dialog boxes and close and save as kind of across the Office platform. Okay, so now I'm actually going to make an instance of that object. Now, in past times, we've done this a few times where we say dim RNG, don't type this, I'm just going to example, I'm going to delete it, as a range. And then we will set RNG equal to like range A1. Range A1. Now, in this case, the range already exists. Like that range object is there, I just have to bind onto it. What we're about to do now with this file dialog is we're going to call a function that's going to create the file dialog in memory, and then we'll capture the reference to that object that's created in memory. So we're going to set fd, this object variable, equal to, and then this is how we create that file dialog. Application dot file dialog, and then in parentheses we say what kind we're after. So there's these four: as a save as, an open, and then a folder picker or a file picker. In this case, we're going to use the file picker. That always sounds a little weird to say, the file picker, but that's what they call it. So now I've got a new object. At this point, it's loaded into memory, and I've captured the reference to it, the address in memory where it's located. That's now stored in this variable. And so I can use that variable to change properties or call methods of that object. So I'm going to say that I want to show this file dialog. And so that's just going to be fd, and I'm going to call the show method. Let's go that far. That's kind of the minimum to actually get. We don't have code here to do anything useful yet, but this should show that file dialog for us. So I'm going to go ahead and run this, and it has opened up this dialog box. And because I said it's the file picker, I'm actually seeing the files. If I had said the folder picker, it would only show me folders here. Files not included. So I could say, oh, that's the one I'm after, say okay, and my code's done. All right, so let's now take a look at what it takes to be able to tell which one the user chose. And so in this case, I'm going to say, I'll just print it out, debug.print. Bring up my immediate window. Now, FD then has kind of the way that you find out which ones are selected is not especially straightforward, but it has an array called selected items. And it's actually not an array, it is a collection. Because it's a collection, it's an object. It has properties and methods of its own, one of which is called count. And so this will tell me how many are selected, how many I select. We'll go ahead and run this, and it's not going to print the name of the file. It's just going to tell me which one is selected. So I'll just select that one. And what happens if I try to select another one? If I hold the control key down and try to select multiple ones and say okay, tells me I had 3 files selected. That's pretty good. So now what I want to do is actually just get out one of those files. And so I could do that just by saying I want the first one, selected item sub1. And I think that's all we need. I think that will now print the name of the first one selected. So if there's only one selected, oh, not just the name, but it's the path and the name, the full path to that file. That looks great. Now, if we wanted to open multiple files, we would just have to kind of look and see which ones are selected. Or we might say, no, we only want them to be able to select one. Okay, so if we want to say, listen, don't go crazy here, you're only selecting one file, well, that's just setting a property of this file dialog to tell it how many we're allowed to select. And actually, we can't really say how many. You're allowed to say, is it allowed to do more than one? That's the question. Because you can either have one or you can have arbitrarily many. And so again, there's a property here. So this one I'm going to set before I show it. So I'm going to configure this dialog. So right at this point, the dialog box is created. It's loaded in memory. I can change the properties of it. And what I want to do is I want to change that default about how many this is allowed to be selected. And so before I get to show, I'm going to say fd dot, oh, it's the first one, allow multi-select. That's a Boolean property. And so I'm going to set that to false. And so now, when I run that, it should only allow me to select one file. So I hold the control key down to try to select another one, and to no avail, it just only selects one. And then it's printing off that location. All right, pretty good. Now let's say that I'm only interested, if I look at this, what else do I have going on here? Let's see, I've got a zip file showing here. Almost everything I have here is Excel files, which is kind of boring. Oh, what if I go to documents? What do I have in documents? So my filter here says all files, and that's all I have to choose from. Ooh, what do I have under Jade? Not much under Jade. Office templates would be good if I had something. Oh, here's something. Where are these? Oh, these are my chat files. So the point is that the user could come in here and say, no, I only want to see Excel files, star.xlsm or xls star. So a user can kind of put a filter on right here. But what I would like to do is I would like to set that up to say, let's start off by only showing the Excel files. So I want to manipulate this filter dropdown that we have right here. And in fact, just so that we can see that working, let me go ahead and come over to my downloads and let me create a text file here. So new text document, hello world. All right, so I now have a text document that's here in my folder. I've got an XLSX and a couple of XLSMs. That looks pretty good. All right, so I'm going to start off. I've got multi-select set here. Let me just do this. FD has an object called filters. So filters is that, it's what's in that drop-down list. And so I'm going to start off by clearing it. Whatever is there, wipe it out. And we're going to add our own filters. So now I'm going to say fd.filters.add. Now I'm going to give it two arguments here. The first argument is what do I want to display? What's the text that I want to display here? And this I'm going to say Excel files. And then the second one is going to be a comma separated list of wildcard settings and say what files do I want to include here. So for this, I'm going to say that's going to be star.xlsx or star.xlsm or star.xlsb. Those are the main Excel files, or I guess even like an old school Excel file, star.xls. And while I'm at it, oops, why don't I add Excel macro files? So macros can be in everything except this XLSX one. Make another one, Excel macro free files. And that's only the XLSX one. Truth is, I can't really tell if there's a macro in an XLSM file, but if it says XLSM, it could have a macro. So we're going to limit it that way. And let me do one more thing here. I'm going to set the filters. Actually, it has a separate property called filter index. And I'm going to set that equal to, why don't we do the macro free files? I think that's going to be number 3. Because this is a collection and not an array, it's going to start counting at 1. I think we'll find out. Let me set it. I'm going to set it to 2, and that should hit the second one. But even if it does start counting at 0, that'll hit the third one when you run it. Filter INDEX. There we go. So yeah, that's the second one that is coming up the defaulted. The user can then pick a different one. We come back to my documents. We'll see that, oops, my downloads. We'll see that my text file is not there. And here I'm seeing all Excel files. This should show me just the macro enabled one. So the XLSX one goes away. Of course, that one will show the XLSX only. I think we can still override that with a star.star, and that'll show everything, even though we haven't given that as an option to the user. Questions? Yes. Well, if you cleared it out and then didn't add anything else in. Oh, then that one would stay there, right? It'll still, oh, interesting. I expected it to say all files. Didn't it say all files before? Interesting. So it looks like it cleared it anyway as soon as I added a real one. If we wanted to, we could add that one back in as just all files with the filter of star.star. So even without clearing it, apparently, as soon as I start adding my own values into it, entirely sure if the object is remembering it between runs. It might have remembered the prior clear. I'm just not sure. Was that enough of an answer, or do you want me to try to chase something else down for you? Looks like it was enough. Okay. Well, let's do something with the path that comes back. So what this does not actually open the file. All this does is tell us a path of the file that the user has chosen. So let's just go ahead and open up a workbook file here. So to open up this workbook, let me do this. Let me declare a variable WB as a workbook. So now after we show it, and I guess after we print the selected one, I'm just going to open that. So it would be enough for me to say workbooks, which is the collection of all open workbooks, dot open, and then just give it a path. And the path is what's in this selected items collection. But what I really want to do is I want to have a reference to that workbook. Not only will this statement open the workbook, it'll actually open that workbook in Excel, it's going to send back a reference to where that workbook is loaded into memory. And if I capture that, then I've got a variable I can use to refer to and manipulate that workbook. So I'm going to say set WB equal to that workbook. And now that I'm doing something with what comes back from this function, this method, I'm going to have to put arguments, or the argument list will have to go into parentheses. And I'm going to stop my code right there to kind of keep it loaded in memory so we can see what's going on. So I'm going to select this. I'll come into my crime data. Oops, I'm going to want all maybe macro-free workbooks. And I'll open up Alabama. And it did open Alabama. Here it is, open. It's nice. So, but the point here is that because I've got this WB variable, I can use that to manipulate the file. So I could like insert a worksheet into it. wb.worksheets.add. And I'll step into that. And that should have added a new worksheet here. Yeah, so I've got worksheet 1 has added, the old one still here. So, I might want to, actually manipulate this workbook. In fact, when you're doing the database project, the only numbers you're really interested in are the raw numbers here. So violent crime is a sum of the next 4 columns over. So I might actually have my code, let me just go ahead and do it. I'm going to delete this sheet because you probably won't want to delete a sheet here. But I might very well say, WB, how am I going to get to this worksheet? I got to get to this worksheet. I've got a reference to the workbook, but how am I going to get particularly to this worksheet to manipulate this worksheet? Well, if I happen to know the table is, the name of the table is 11TBL09AL, I can go by its name, but that's going to be different from state to state, and I'm not sure that I can predict what that name is going to be reliably. So how could I be sure that I get to the first worksheet, the only worksheet in this workbook? Yeah, the worksheets collection allows me to refer to it by index. So WB, that workbook dot worksheets sub 1, that'll be a reference to that worksheet. If I just want to delete the fourth column, columns number 4 dot delete. And F8, where did you go? And so that's deleted that crime column. I'm going to go ahead and delete column H as well, the property crime column. So after I delete column 4, that one will be column 8. And I've now deleted that one. So the point here is that by getting a reference to the workbook that I have opened, I can then have a reliable way to reach into that particular sheet and do something with it. And ultimately, when I'm done kind of organizing that data in a way that will make it easy for me to work with it for this project, I'm going to say I want to close that workbook, wb.close. And this has an option now for me to put whether I want to save the changes or not, and I'm going to say false. So save changes parameter is false. That means close it, don't save the changes. And the reason is, you can imagine what's going to happen if I save the changes and I ran this code again. What would it do? It would delete my actual data, right? Because those, it's going to say, delete those columns, and they're already gone. So I definitely don't want to save this. But now we should be able to see that line of code close that workbook. So we'll run that, and it closes it without saving. And so it's nice to be able to get a reference to that workbook. Then you don't have to assume that it's the active workbook. Would it be the active workbook if I just opened it? Yeah, it would become active. And so I could just assume it's active, but that gets a little dangerous because if a user clicks while that's running, it could change what the active workbook is, and we're much better off saying we know exactly which workbook we're talking about. Now, so let's see, I'm not adding, I think this is okay. I'm gonna go ahead and run this out, get rid of my breakpoint. Now let's do this. Let's say I'm gonna run this code. The user, invoked something to say, hey, I wanna go ahead and do this import process. And then let's suppose that was you. I think I wanna import this data. And then you went, oh, you know what? I don't really wanna import this data. What would you do at this point? You're the user at the interface. You just said, I'm gonna import this data. You changed your mind. What would you do at this point? As a user with a mouse, what would you do? Yeah, you click cancel. No problem, let's click cancel. By the way, what does my code do when you cancel? Well, yeah, it's not gonna know what you're talking about. It just says you show it, and then we're gonna open up whichever one's selected. Which one do you think is selected when I hit cancel? If I haven't canceled it, I haven't selected it. Well, actually, even if I have selected one, when I hit cancel, I'll get an error right here, and it's because, let's go ahead and look at the selected items. Let me ask for the count of which one's selected. Did I have one selected? I did, I selected a file. Let me just go ahead and put the count of that, and we'll see that even though there was one selected, when they hit cancel, there's nothing selected. And so that is how I can tell if the user hit cancel, I think it's only if they hit cancel or if they close it by the red button. Just go ahead and run that again. I think we'll get the same thing. So over here, the red X. Now I can't open it unless I have something selected. So if nothing's selected, it means either it was canceled or the user closed it by this. Either one is going to give me no files selected. So here's what I'm going to do. And I could either put an if statement in here and build everything else into it to see if there is something there. But what I prefer, because the less nesting of code you have, the better it is for maintainability. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to say if the count of what we have selected is equal to 0, there's nothing selected, then I'm going to exit sub. Just done. That way, if I get past this line, I know there was something selected. And in this case, I'll know there was only one selected because I set multi-select to false. So we'll know there's just one thing selected and I'm ready to go ahead and work with that particular file. I'll go back and show that dialog box again. And now when I hit cancel, no error, code's done running. That's what I wanted to show you about the file dialog box. There are lots of other properties and methods of the file dialog box. Is there anyone that has any questions or want to do a little more snooping around about how to make this do something in particular? We could snoop. Okay, let's look on to a different example. And in fact, what I'm going to have you do for the database project is not, it's not this. It's not go pick the file you want to import. It's going to assume, your code is going to assume that you're going to import all of the XLSX files that are in the folder that's in the crime folder in the same place where your workbook is. So if I look here, when we say import, we just want to say, all right, there's going to be a folder called crime, and we want to work through all the folders, all the workbook files that are inside that. So let's see how to do that particular part of this project. Maybe we'll come up here to the top, and why don't we just make a sub procedure called process all. All right, this is going to take a little bit, a few more variables. So let me go ahead and declare a variable called a path. So path is the term that we use for like the full, all the information that gets me to that file. So starting from the root drive or the root folder. So dim path as a string. I'm also going to want a file name. Okay, now to understand this next part, we have to turn the clock back to the early 1980s, maybe the 1970s. I'm going to go ahead and open up I don't think they let me open up a command prompt here. They think, oh yeah. Apparently I could do something evil if I had a command prompt. The command prompt has been disabled by my administrator. But let me see if I can open up PowerShell, which is like command prompt on steroids. And that one they're just fine with. So here I am in GLN2. I'm going to change directories, CD to downloads. And I just want to see what's here. Folks, it turns out this used to be our whole interface to a computer. Like before Windows, we're working on DOS. This is what it was like. There's no mouse. You just type stuff. So I would be like, you know what? I want to see what's here. dir, not die. I kind of felt like that sometimes. dir. And oops, it will show me then all the files that are there, right? The same information I would get looking in the file browser, but I'm just looking at it right here. So yeah, there's the one here called crime. So I could change directories into the crime folder, cd crime, and do a dir there and see the files that I'm interested in. But this dir statement, which is short for directory, give me a directory listing. This dir statement also takes a wildcard. So I could say, you know what? I just want to see those that start with M. m*.xlsx. I want to see XLSX files that start with M. And that will show me those. Why am I showing you this? It's because the statement that we're about to see in VBA comes directly from this command line argument. It's called the dir. It's called dir. We'll just come up here and play with it the immediate window before we put it into our code. So question mark dir, and then I'm going to give it a path. So the path that I want to go to, actually before we do that, let me just get the path. Okay, so there's the path to where this workbook is. Right, so I just printed this workbook.path and it gave me this. I'm putting in quotes here because I'm saying I want, give me the directory, not of that, but from there into the crime folder. And then I want star.xlsx. So I'm asking it to give me a directory listing of all the files that are in that location and meet that wildcard filter. And what I get back from this command is going to seem really strange. How many files are there, by the way? How many files does that describe? Actually, there's only 48. There's 2 states missing. I'm not sure why they are. It's like they didn't have any universities that reported any crime during that year. Yes, it's going to be something close to 50. This is going to give me back 1 file, which seems strange until we remember it was the 1970s. We had afros and bell bottoms. Everything was strange. This seemed normal to us in the 1970s. So now the way I go about getting the next one is just by giving a bear call to dir again. And that gets me the next one, and the next one, and the next one, until I run out. Oops. That's strange. Let me do this. How many states do we have that start with U? Is Utah the only one? That shouldn't take long. So U star dot star. So I get Utah, and then when I make the next request here, it gives me an empty string back. That's how it signals to me we're done with the files. If I ask again for it after it's told me it's done, I get an error. It's invalid. There's nothing else to get here. So the thing about the way that this statement works is I say, give me the path. You know, this is, give me the directory of this location. And then I'm going to make multiple calls to dir without telling it where to look until I get to a blank string. And then I know I will have processed it all. Whew. So that's what we have to do in code to be able to get at all of these. So let's do it. So I'm going to start off by setting my path. Let's do this. I'm going to say path equals this workbook.path. So that's going to get me to the place where my workbook is. Now, according to the instructions in the assignment, you're going to have a folder called crime. It's in that same location. So all I have to do is say, okay, well, let me change what path is. And I can do this all in one statement or 2, that's okay. Path is going to equal what it used to be now, concatenated with a backslash, and then, or actually backslash crime. Maybe backslash on the end of it. Now it'd be just great if everyone used Windows in the world. And one of the nice things about this built-in way of working with files and folders, even though it's kind of feels a little bit antiquated, is that it is operating system independent. But what's the path separator on your Mac OS? Do you folks know? It's not a backslash. What is it? It's a /. Fortunately, there's a property that lets us know what the path separator is. So I can say application .path separator, and it will tell me it's backslash. If I run that same statement on a Mac machine, it'll give me a /. So instead of actually putting the slash as a part of that string, I'm going to concatenate on the path separator, and then concatenate on crime, and then concatenate on the path separator again. And so now, regardless of whether I'm on Mac or Windows, I've got the path to the folder that I'm after. That's good. Now I'm ready to set my file name equal to the first file in that path. So I will do that by saying file name equals dir of the path concatenated with star.xlsx. So ultimately, you can kind of just see what path is going to be at this point. So I'm setting path equal to this workbook.path, and then I'm appending onto that this other stuff. So it should be the same as what I get here. So that gets me that full path. And what I'm asking for the directory of is just appending this onto the end. So this is what that first dir statement is going to look like. And that will pull back that first file. So I am assigning that file name that it found here into file name. Now, what am I going to get if there's nothing that meets the criteria? What if I say I'm looking for XLSQ, or no files in that folder, by the way, that end with XLSQ? What is this going to return? Any guesses? Not an error, thankfully. It's going to give us an empty string. It's the way that the dir function responds to say you're done with the list. Empty string, done with the list. So now, just to be sure that I'm actually getting a file here, let's just do this. I want to now go into a loop. I'm going to do until file name is equal to an empty string. So if it's an empty string to start with, at this point, I'm going to skip right past this loop. Anytime I have a do loop, I darn well better put in a do events into it. And so now I'm ready to process that file. So maybe what I'll do here is I'll just print debug.print. My file name. So I'm ready to do whatever I want to with that file, but when I'm done with that, I need to get the next file name put in here. Well, I just make a call to dir without supplying any arguments. In fact, I don't even really need those parentheses on the end. I can do it just like that. So this is going to get Alabama. I'll print Alabama. This is going to get Alaska. And then I'll loop up here. Is file name blank? Nope. I'll print Alaska. Then I'm going to get Alabama, Alaska. Then I'll get Arizona. Is Arizona next? I'll print Arizona. Then Arkansas. Anyway, those are the 4 A's. I'm not sure if I got them in the right order. But let me just go ahead and put a breakpoint here and run this code, and we should see it just go through and do that. Process all. And file name as string. So it's printing Alabama. dir tells it to get the next one off the list. It's not blank, so it comes in, prints the next one. dir gets the next one off the list, and it's just going to run through and do all 50 of those. And I'll just run it out for all 48. Now, this would probably work just the way we've done it here, but like for your project. But I have a little bit of a worry, and that is, let's suppose I call some other function, which I probably would do. I probably wouldn't do all of my code to ingest that data here. I'd probably call some other function that's dedicated just to processing one file. And let's suppose in the process of doing that, I want to do another dim statement. I mean, another dir statement. I want to go find some other file somewhere. As soon as I make another call to the dir statement where I give it a path, what happens to the list that I was working on before? Poof, gone. And so this code is really fragile, because if somewhere, like if I'm calling some other function from in here, another function calls a function which calls a function that does a dir statement, it's going to blow away this loop. It's going to break this loop, because all of a sudden I will have a different set of file names in it. That's no good. And so what I'm going to do here is, rather than instead of doing the heavy lifting here, all I'm going to do is make something that can hold those file names stable. And in fact, I want a little bit more than the file name itself, because I want the path as well. So let me print off. Let me just concatenate the path on here as well. So now I'm getting, just like what we got back from the file dialog, I'm now getting the full path to that file. So I could like write those out to a worksheet. That would be a way of making it stable. I could write them out to a worksheet, and then I could just read them off that worksheet. That way, if someone else calls dir while I'm in the middle of processing, it's not a big deal. But there's something that's kind of built in, really meant for handling this, and it's called a collection. We've talked about collections. There's a collection of, your workbook has a property called worksheets, which is a collection of all the worksheets. The application has a collection called workbooks, which is a collection of all the workbooks. What's a collection? It's just an object that has references to lots of other objects. But we can make our own collection from scratch. Here's how we do it. Dim file list as collection. Set file list equal to a new collection. So this just allocates a variable ready to hold a reference to a collection object. This then creates a collection object and attaches it to that variable. This little pattern is so common, where you say, I am going to declare a variable and then bind a newly created object to it. Oh, by the way, this is kind of the first time that we've seen this, where it's not some function that creates the object like this one does. So our file dialog actually says, oh, we want to create one of these dialogs, and it returns a reference to it. This new statement just says, make a new one of these. Well, it's so common to do this that you can put the word new right there as a new collection, and we don't need this. So by putting the word new on this dim statement, it allocates the memory, says I'm going to hold, this is going to hold the location of some object in memory. What kind of objects can be allowed to bind onto this? Only collection objects. And by the way, let's make a brand new collection object in memory and bind the variable onto it immediately. We don't have to do new with range, because all our ranges are there. Where would it put the range if you created a new range anyway? Like on the very bottom, like way below all the others? You don't make new ranges. But this collection, we actually have to say, hey, make a new collection, and that will give me the objects to hold I have to put the other objects into the collection. We'll see that here in just a second. Question? Okay, so yeah, the question is, so how do we actually get objects into this collection? And remember that collections are themselves objects, and so they have methods. And there's a method called add, which allows you to add a new object into the collection. And that's what we're going to do right here. And it can be like a reference to another object, or it can be a string. I can just add strings into this collection, which is what we're going to do here. So instead of printing this, I'm just going to say file list dot add. And I will add, instead of printing out that whole path name, I'm just going to add that into the file list. Let me go ahead and stop my code after this runs. and run to there. So I just ran the code through here. It's gone through all 48 of those, and it has said 48 times, add some particular path and file name into that collection. So I should be able to ask for my file list .count, and it will tell me how many are in there. And I should be able to look at file list number 3 and get one of those strings back. So now at this point, I very quickly have just run through and processed that whole entire dir statement, all 48 files that came back on that dir statement. And so now, if something else happens, someone else calls the dir statement, or when I say someone else, I mean code that someone else wrote that I wasn't really paying attention to when I called that's going to call that. I don't have to worry about it destroying that list because I have let it stay in memory for the dir statement long enough to copy that whole list and put it into something more stable, a collection object. And so now I can have a separate loop. We'll just go ahead and run this the rest of the way out. Let me dim x as an integer. And I can just say for x equals 1 to my file list dot count. debug.print file list sub x. Right, so first time through, it'll be printing file list sub 1. It'll print whatever's in the first, second. Next time through, it'll print file list sub 2, then sub 3, all the way to 48. So now I'm kind of back to where I was before when I was just printing it out in here, but now I'm protected against kind of errant calls to the dir function. I'm still getting that whole list out. So this is a common pattern for dealing with files in VBA, list of files in VBA. Questions here? Okay, shall we work on the project a little bit? Yeah, why not? This is my way of getting back at the people who don't come to class or watch the videos. Don't tell them about this. Yeah, you guys. All right, let me go ahead and stop this code. I'm going to make another sub-procedure here called process 1. Now, this sub-procedure, I'm going to expect a path. So here's the idea. I've got this one up here called process all. It is going to, build the list of files to process, and maybe I will let it print it off, but it then is going to call process 1, and it's going to send to process 1 the path to execute. It's going to say, hey, we're processing what? What are we processing? You're processing this file. It's giving you the full path to it. And so process 1 is going to open that file, do everything it has to do with that file, close it, and then do all the importing with it. So I need to make some provision to receive the full path to the file that I'm sending down here. So I'm going to declare a variable right here. It's a parameter that allows me to take in a value to this procedure. And I'll just call it file path as a string. Let me dim WB as a workbook. Set WB equal to workbooks dot open file path. Right, so the very thing that I printed here. Okay, so this is a little bit strange. I just want to make sure, I want to see how comfortable you are with this. Here it's called file list sub x. I'm sending whatever that evaluates to down to process 1, and that value gets received by file path. So I don't have to worry about file list sub x anymore because down here, that value is called file path. And so when I open it, it's going to open that particular file. How comfortable on a scale of 0 to 5 are you with what I just went through? 5, 5, 3, 5, 5, 5, 2. Okay, this is a one that takes a little bit of getting used to. is that we can have different names for the same variable or for the same location in memory. What's a variable? It's a named location in memory. In this case, I'm saying, oh, well, that's somewhere in memory, file list sub x, that's referring to a particular position in that collection. A collection is just a collection of variables. And I can have another different name that points to that same location in memory. Let me do something just to kind of drive that home, that it's actually two different names for the same location in memory. Let me put a stop right here. And I'm going to run this. And it's opened up that file. Right, so if I ask it to print file path, it'll print that path to Alabama. But I think I can do this. I can actually change that value, just like I would change any variable. File path equals, and I think this will work even though it's in a collection, E5. Okay, I'm going to step out of this, F8. Okay, now I haven't executed this next yet, and so file list should still be looking at that same file. The last time I executed this line, it printed Alabama. That's what printed that line right here. I'm going to execute that again, just drag back up to it, and execute that with an F8. And it didn't change it. Oh, wait a minute. It went to Alabama. What's X? We might have to do a simpler example to drive home what I was trying to get it to do, but X is 1. No, that's right. Yeah, it's because we're dealing with the collection, it's a little more, it's not able just to refer to the same location. So it has made a copy of it. So this is going to be a different location in memory that has copied the value over to it. But the main thing that I wanted you to see is that it's called file list sub x up here. I pass file list sub x down to this procedure, and it gets received into the variable file path. All right. So we're opening that, and let me just go ahead and get you started with the first couple of things. What would I do here? I think I really would. In fact, I've already got those statements. Let me just bring them up. I'm going to open that. I'm going to delete those two columns. Here's another thing that will save you a half hour or more on the project. This has a campus column. There's only one school in Alabama that's reporting here that has multiple campus names, and it's apparently the University of Alabama. And even though they've got multiple campuses, anyone know University of Alabama, how many campuses they have? Or where their campuses are? Apparently one's in Huntsville. And you must have others, otherwise you wouldn't have campus names. And yet there's only one that they're using here, which means whatever other campus they have, they're not participating in this crime reporting process the FBI has set up. But what happens if there's no campuses? In other words, there's no colleges that have a value for campus, as I think we're going to see in Utah. So let me just open up Utah really quick as for a comparison. Yeah, so if we look at Utah, these are the different campuses that are reporting in Utah. None of those have a different campus name, at least not as of 2011. I'm not sure if we would have, no, I don't think, we don't call ourselves BYU Provo, even though some people call us that. We're just BYU here. So what's the problem? Yeah, with the column not being there, when I delete the fourth column, what am I deleting? I'm deleting my data. No, don't delete the data. This is the only thing that's structurally different about these files, is whether that's there or not. So let's do this. before we do the deleting, let's come here and let's say if, and let's look at that worksheet. In fact, you know what I might do just to kind of make this code a little bit easier to work with? Let's do this. Let me dim S as a worksheet. Set S equal to the first worksheet in the workbook. So now I can refer to that worksheet just with S. If S dot range, and where does it say campus? B5. So if I'm looking at B5, the value of B5, and that's not equal to campus, then I know we're missing the campus column. Then I'm just going to insert a column, S dot columns 5 dot insert. So now what I'm saying is, listen, if there's no column, if there's no campus column here, put a column there anyway. Then I know the rest of the data is going to be in the right place. That's going to make my life a little bit better. And then we're comfortable deleting this. So this one's going to delete property crime summary, or is it the violent crime? Violent crime summary. And the other one will delete the property crime summary. Okay, so I'm then going to do some other stuff in there. Yeah. Oh, B5, right, that's exactly right. 5 is the row there, this is column 2. Excellent, thank you very much. Then when I'm done, let's go ahead and close the workbook. And because I bound, when I open that workbook, I captured the reference to that workbook with the variable. I'll just come here and say wb.close and then false. So now, let's see, I've got to, let me put a do events in here so I can break into this. And let me go ahead and close Alabama and Utah. But I should be able to run process all, and it's going to go through. Can we even see what it's on? No, it's not staying open long enough for me to actually see it, what it's doing. Oh, but I can see them down here. So I've got Louisiana, Maine, Maryland, I'm cranking through them. And it does take a little bit of time to open up a worksheet, but yeah, it'll, in this project, when we get to it, and we haven't talked about the database part of this project yet, but when we get to this project, you know, you are going to actually execute like 6,000 different queries to bring the data off those worksheets and bring them into the database. Now, here's what's going to happen. You're going to get it going, and it's going to take you hours, but you're going to finally get Alabama working. And well, fortunately for you, when you get to Alaska, which also does not have any campuses, your Alaska is going to work. For your folks that didn't watch the video, they're going to get it going, and then they're going to get to Alaska and be like, oh, the second one doesn't work when I get to it. And so if you have to wait for your code, like by the time you get to, you're going to have trouble at Texas too, and probably at Maryland. So when you get to Maryland, that's way down in the M's. You don't want to have to wait for the whole thing to run to get to the M's before you're ready to do Maryland. So here's what we're going to do. In fact, we can go to Wisconsin really quickly here by making a sub procedure here that just, maybe I'll put it down here just above process 1. that instead of saying, well, to run this, we're going to run process all. No. Let's just make one that's just for debugging only. Sub my Acme runner. It's just going to call process one file and pass it the file that I'm working on. So now I can run this one and I can jump right there to Wisconsin. I want to change it to Utah. It'll jump right to Utah. So while I'm doing development, this is probably how I want to be running it to test that my code is working. So instead of arbitrarily passing one down wherever it is in the list, I'm saying, no, I'm working on Utah right now. Let's deal with Utah. Let's see. What else could I tell you about this that would be helpful at this point in your life? Here we are in Utah. Oh, good. It's inserted the column here. That's probably, I guess we could do one more thing. So one of the challenging parts here of this project is kind of knowing where to stop. Fortunately, the data always starts in A6, but you're going to have a different number of universities from state to state, and you've got to know where to stop. Well, only way we've done that in class so far is like when you run out of data. But what's the problem with just waiting until you run out of data here is you've got footnotes that are also there in that column one. So the last thing we'll do today is let's go ahead and set up a loop that will run through this and just isolate the data that we're after. This is a part that students usually really struggle with. So this is an extra bonus for you. Okay, so we're in process one file. Let me go ahead and declare a variable dim x, dim r as a long integer. We'll set r equal to the 6th row. That's where the data starts. And then we're going to do loop, do events, r equals r plus 1. Let me just do a print, debug.print. Of s.cells, row number r, column number 1. Okay, now I've set this up as an endless loop for now. We're going to see how to exit. That's the whole point. How are we going to exit this loop? Well, let me come through here and shift F8. Dim, that should be S. Okay, that should print off our first campus. And we're going to step through here. Now we're getting to the loop. It's printed College of Eastern Utah. We've now added 1 to R. And so R is going to be referring to this cell right here. I'm going to keep going until we get to Weber State. Okay. So we've just printed Weber State. I'm going to go one more. I'm moving R forward by 1 more. So R now is referring to row number 12. So what can I do looking at this cell right now to tell I'm at the end of the list? You might say, if this thing is really long, that's pretty good. That might actually work in this data set. What I'm not sure about is we might have a footnote that's pretty short. There might be a file where the first footnote ends up being short. My hunch is that there's not. I think that would probably work. Yeah. I could look for university or college. That would probably work here. Again, we got 50 states, and I'm not sure that they're going to have either university or college in it. They might. Again, that might work. Yep. Oh. Yeah, again, I think that would work as well. You guys are coming up with some really good things that I think that would work. I'm going to do the one that I know works, and that is that border. The data is always bounded with a single, can you even tell that it's a border there? Right, there's a border here, and there's a border on this one as well. Trouble is that it's the same border. So if I say up here, when I first come into the loop, do until the top border is this, I'm in trouble because it would let me out straight away. But if I do the checking down here, after I've moved off that first cell, then I can look for when the top border is that single line. So let's do this. Let me just see if I remember how to get to that. Active cell dot borders. AC. I was hoping for some help here. Oh, ACTIVE cell dot borders. There we go. XL edge top dot, and I think it's like width, weight, style. Line style. Okay, so when I'm on this cell, that expression, borders, edge, top, line style is 1. If I'm on this cell, it's -4142, which is XL none, right? There's a name for that. So I'm going to do this until s.cells, row number R, column number 1, dot the top edge line style is equal to 1. So it'll do this one before it checks, move down and ask the question, is the top line style 1? No. Line style 1? No, 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 no. As soon as it gets to here, it's going to check that question. It's going to go, yes, we're done with the loop. So that should print off that set. Clear this. Set this back to 6. I'm going to stop here. And we've got College of Eastern Utah to Weber State University. And that will be a reliable loop. Again, I think some of these other ones that you came up with would have worked as well. All right. Ooh, I've said enough and maybe too much. Maybe this will be just, maybe you won't really appreciate this project anymore because it'll be too easy at this point. I don't know. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and stop this and save this code, and I think we're in good shape. Any other questions? Yeah, last question. This is the part that doesn't really deal with databases at all. In terms of like the major problems that we've just covered, this is probably 2 of the 5 kind of really things that students tend to struggle with. Okay. All right. Thanks for coming. Class dismissed.
Yeah, so the U.S. Department of Education, they have a really great site where you can download data for one school, or you can download data for all schools. And inside of it, you can choose the different years.
Open up one of those and just see what data it gives.